Blessings, everyone, and thank you for tuning into my weekly IG Live conversations, aptly entitled Lifting the Veil. We try to lift the veil so that people can begin to see things that normally perhaps they don't know about or can't see. I originally had that particular title because I was teaching this year that we're in an apocalyptic moment. An apocalypse, one of the meanings of the apocalypse is the lifting of the veil, where that which was hidden can now be seen. So we're in such a moment now in human history on so many different levels. The double pandemic of scourge of insane racism, as well as the COVID-19 and all the ramifications of that on people. So the veil is being lifted, and we've been having some wonderful conversations. I'm going to call forth into my IG Live now Martin Luther King III and Andrea Waters King. They're a husband and wife. As you know, Martin Luther King III is the eldest son of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. He serves as an ambassador of his parents' legacy of nonviolent social change, founded realizing the dream which focused on redressing poverty by strategizing with community organizers to ignite investment in local neighborhoods and foster peaceful coexistence within the U.S. and internationally. He was a former member of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners in Georgia, where he successfully lobbied to have the Confederate flag removed. Former president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which his dad co-founded. Former president and CEO of the King Center in Atlanta. Currently serves on the board of the Drum Major Instinct. One of the greatest talks Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. ever gave was the Drum Major Instinct, which was co-founded by his father in 1961 and is dedicated to fostering a culture of nonviolence and active participation in our democracy. Andrea Waters King has spent her life living her commitment to social justice by consistently supporting those who have been marginalized and silenced and collectively to use their voice for change. Worked with the Center for Democratic Renewal, which she organized the first national conference on hate crimes and hate violence. She played a key role in the mobilization for the Georgia Hate Crimes Act and prepared major reports, including the landmark When Hate Comes to Town. She has also helped organize marches and rallies that led to the rebuilding of the major multiracial coalition, the Southern Coalition Against Racism and Bigotry. These individuals have been busy. Andrea and her husband are currently developing the Martin Luther King III Partnership for Equity, Peace, and Justice. We're going to bring them on right now. So you have time to tell your peoples to come on and tune in. And obviously, this will be recorded, and you will be able to come back to my Instagram Live or tell your friends about it, and they can come listen to it. What we can't complete on the Instagram, we're going to put on my app. So there'll be a bonus conversation on the app, and I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. But right now, we are searching for Martin Luther King III and his wife, Andrea. And they should be popping up here shortly. Technology is just an interesting kind of thing. It's saying for some reason, if you can hear me, Martin, say that you're able to join, but now I think you're joining. So technology is sometimes a little bit slow, but I think you've heard me read their bios, and they're also good friends of mine, and they are virtual members of the Agape International Spiritual Community, tuning in on Sundays, like many of you do. For those of you who don't know, Agape, that was inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a kid, hear those speech about unconditional love, about agape love being the highest form of love in the Greek language, it penetrated my bones. And so before I started agape, I had something called agape transformationals, which was a combination of Dr. King's inspiration and Malcolm X's inspiration of how he transformed life. There they are, the married team, Andrea and Martin.
How are you?
I am good. Let me see how we are. We all fit? Are we all good here?
I think we are.
We're good to go.
Make some camera adjustments. There you go. Hey, good to see you guys.
Always good to see and be with you, and we thank God for just the opportunity to really share today in whatever way the universe and spirit leads us.
It's always good to be with you and with the agape community.
And you guys still tune in on Sundays?
Absolutely.
It's a date. We're always, yes, we do. Yep, from Atlanta or wherever we happen to be.
But mostly it's been Atlanta here for the last few months.
It's been busy. Hey, listen, does Yolanda tune in as well?
Absolutely.
Yes, she does.
Yes, she does.
Beautiful.
And in our home, not only do we tune in on Sunday, we find that we love the streaming archives, and it's always good and edifying for us throughout the week to revisit, as we are just in the kitchen, whether we're cooking, taking our vitamins, to have that service again in our home, in our atmosphere. We play it a couple of times throughout.
Sometimes 3.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that a lot from people. I was just listening to a woman who wrote me and said the same thing, that she listens to it at least 3 times during the week and then waits for the next one on Sunday. But those 3 times kind of carry her through with all of the intensity that we're living through right now. She said it was kind of her life. So listen, I wanted to talk to you, Andrea. First of all, you had a long-time relationship and worked with the Honorable John Lewis, who we just had that beautiful memorial service. And what was that? What kind of work were you doing with him, and what did you garner from being around him?
Well, actually, the work I did was with the Reverend C.T. Vivian, who passed away the same day as John Lewis. And C.T. Vivian.
C.T. Vivian.
Yes.
Vivian, yes, C.T. Vivian,
yes.
Right.
And the work that I did under his leadership was, I worked for an organization called the Center for Democratic Renewal, which it was formerly known as the National Anti-Klan Network. And what we would do is monitor hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, skinheads, so on and so forth. But we also would go into communities and help communities organize, particularly communities that have been impacted by these hate groups and hate violence. So I worked on both sides. I worked with monitoring the groups, but I also worked a lot with going into communities and helping communities organize when hate violence had happened, or, we worked with Matthew Shepard's family. We went to Pearl, Mississippi, when a young Black man was found hanging in his front yard, who had been dating a white young lady. We worked on the Black church burnings in South Carolina, and numerous other communities that did not make the news.
Right. Now, give the folks a little bit of understanding.
Dr. Vivian. And Dr.
Give them a little understanding. Yeah. I want you to say a little bit who Vivian was. Yeah.
He was an extraordinary human being. He was actually instrumental in a lot of Martin's father's campaign, but in particular Selma. And I would encourage anyone listening, once we finish this live stream, to search C.T. Vivian, and search in particular C.T. Vivian in Selma, Alabama. And there's footage of him going into the courthouse, or attempting to go into the courthouse there are, I think, about 20 Black people with him that lived in Selma, and they were attempting to vote. And on this particular day, the sheriff met them at the front of the courthouse, would not allow them in front of the cameras, literally took his club and beat CT Vivian. But what's most extraordinary about that footage is CT immediately stands up and just gives the most impromptu, beautiful speech, one of the most beautiful speeches I've ever heard. That was one of the things he did. He also was involved with the Nashville sit-in movement. He also was involved with integrating beaches in Florida. And of course, he worked closely with Martin's father throughout the years. And as his lifespan shows, he never stopped. I mean, I worked with him in the late 90s to the early 2000s, and this organization had started in the 80s. So he was a continual giant, beautiful spirit, one of the most courageous human beings that I've ever come across. And I just loved spending time with him and talking to him literally, at his feet. Also on our board, interestingly enough, at that time was a lady named Ann Braden. And I bring her name up as well because it's important for all of us to know our history and those who have sacrificed tremendously for where we are today. And Ann Braden is a white Southerner. So in particular, I think there's a lot of right now conversations amongst, white allies about, their place or the place as we are in this new movement. And Ann Braden and her husband in the 1950s in Louisville, Kentucky, helped a Black family to buy a home. And they were ostracized. They weren't able to get jobs. They basically were, just the outpouring, the negative outpouring that they received from that, and the tremendous sacrifice. But the interesting thing about Ann, if you talk to her and she would, she had a good whiskey in her hand, and she would say that she never regretted that decision. But those are two people that I would, those are two that I would certainly encourage everybody to look up after we get off of this, and hopefully to be inspired. Because the thing about these stories is for inspiration and to find ourselves in these stories. They're not just for the history books. They're guideposts for all of us now as we continue to take our journeys in the expansion of freedom.
Absolutely. Because as they find themselves in those individuals, there's a lot of work for us to do right this moment.
Absolutely.
And so, like you say, this is not history. This is an unfolding of justice, an unfolding of peace, an unfolding of nonviolence, an unfolding of actually being architects and builders of the beloved community. And that's happening now. And
yes,
so CT Vivian, and I knew CT, and I had him speak at Agape a couple of times, and we would hang out, and I would go to Morehouse at times and speak there. We would hang out. But he lived 95 powerful years.
Yes.
As he said, and never relented in the fight for justice. And so it's a powerful thing to think about an individual's life and that kind of commitment.
Absolutely.
Now, both of you, I'll throw this off to Martin first, but with everything going on in the world right now, we have obviously everything that has happened the past number of months. Would you consider yourself optimistic about what's happening in the world and the birthing of the beloved community? How do you hold the radical tension about the systemic racism, the death of George Floyd and others, and everything that's happening now with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, changing of policy? There's so much swirling around. How do you hold this in yourself now?
So number one, I always try to view things through a prism that is positive, because it's easy to get caught up in negative rhetoric, particularly if one is a connoisseur of mainstream or any kind of news, because often the little stories, the victories that are happening all the time are rarely shared. And so you have to be first of all, I think your foundation can be shattered, but it's important to have and find ways to sustain through edifying, things that you look at, things that you read, to fortify yourself from that which might be perceived as negative. But I'm very optimistic about the potential that can and will come in our nation and in our world. Maybe we're going through a metamorphosis. And what I mean by that is you can look at an example of various types of animals or insects. I mean, for example, a butterfly starts off as a caterpillar, and a caterpillar looks one way and is an interesting insect. But when it goes through that metamorphosis, it's very painful, probably, it appears to be. And if you jump in and try to change that trajectory as that butterfly is attempting to come out of that cocoon, it interrupts and ruins it. It has to go through a certain process. And then when it actually arrives, it's a beautiful creature, one of the most beautiful, one of most God's beautiful creatures. So to some degree, maybe we're going through some kind of metamorphosis as a society. And at the other end, it will be phenomenal changes. And the fact is that whether it's demonstrations that we see really all over the world,
Yes.
These are the largest civil rights demonstrations that we've ever experienced in our lives. We have never seen this level. And I mean, I read the other day about a group of people. Now, the strategy was interesting. They went into a little small town called Zinc, Arkansas, and they confronted the head of the Klan. I don't know if he was of a region or, it was very interesting. Most of the demonstrators were white, but there were blacks. And of course, the people in that town, they had their guns, but it ended up being a peaceful confrontation. I don't know if they ever made it to the supreme leader's home, but the fact of the matter is whites and blacks were confronting and talking, saying, look, we need the dialogue because it's a nation for all of us. And you may disagree, but the fact of the matter is we have to find ways to coexist. That could have erupted into violence, but it didn't. And I just think that I've never known people to go and confront a Klansman who is maybe a significant leader at his home and do it in a nonviolent way. And so we are seeing all kinds of little incidents. There are incidents in small towns in Iowa and other places where you have Black Lives Matter demonstrations that are basically white people leading them. So clearly there's something in the consciousness of our nation that did not exist prior to the tragic death of George Floyd, that people have the propensity to identify that which is wrong and say, we cannot accept this. We are better than this. So from my vantage point, there's still a lot of work to do, but we have the potential to engage in a very significant way and transform our nation and ultimately transform our world. Because again, these demonstrations are going on in Australia, they're going on in Europe, they're going on in South America, they're going in the African continent. So everywhere, just about everywhere we know of, just about, there have been demonstrations. And I don't believe the young people, these are being led, by the way, many of them by young people. I don't think they're going to stop. I don't see, until justice and equality and righteousness occurs for all humankind, I don't see that stopping.
Right, I agree. I don't see it abating either. I was driving down Wilshire Boulevard a couple of weeks ago, and I saw the Black Lives Matter march going down the street, the signs, kids on skateboards and bicycles and skates, and there was some elderly folks as well. And it was 3/4 white walking down Wilshire Boulevard, and they were articulating the fact that Black people had been marginalized for so long. I mean, they had their points very well put together. They were very articulate. It wasn't just screaming, you know what I mean? And they had pamphlets, and I was just sitting in my car looking at it. And of course, I, supported them. But I'm saying, wow, these people are mainly white, young, on skateboards, speaking for the marginalized people on the planet. So something has definitely shifted, because we've seen protests and demonstrations for years after an unarmed Black individual was killed. But this seems to have some staying power that we've never seen before. It's not just burn down a building and be mad and go on. It's actually carrying over to some major policy changes around policing, around the legal system, around chokehold, around so many other issues are now coming to surface as well. So I would have a tendency to agree with you. What do you both feel are the major challenges that we're facing right now?
That's a very interesting question. I think that anytime there is any type of expansion, and whenever you are moving forward, and when you look at any freedom movement over the generations, you can always expect a backlash. You can almost set your clock by it. Yeah. And that, I think, and we have not only started to see, we've been seeing that for a few weeks. For me, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, but it's not an unexpected challenge. Right. And I think that we all need to know that. We also need to know that this is part of, we're in some ways birthing an entirely new civilization. And in the midst of birthing things, there are birthing pains. Yes. I'm seeing and feeling, a lot of that. And I would hope that people will not be discouraged. And I don't think that they are. I think that as people are, still rolling up their sleeves, they're standing up to that. But just to know and to expect and to prepare for the inevitable backlash, and to continue to meet that with strength, with power, with love, and with determination.
And I would add that is so accurate. I would add that there are challenges in relationship to communities that historically have been marginalized. I mean, for example, one of those challenges is access to capital. You've got a significant number of businesses, unfortunately, that are closed and may not ever open because of the pandemic. Right. But if you look at the African American community, and if you look at the Latino and Hispanic community, and many communities of color, and certainly, I think I want to make a specific point about our Native population. Yes. We may call Native Americans, we may call Indians, or we may call the indigenous populations, those who were here before any First Nations, before any of us. While we're talking about providing freedom, creating opportunities, it needs to be for everyone who has been excluded and who has been marginalized and who has been beaten down. We need to find ways to lift up. But what I was going to say specifically is most businesses, 9 out of 10 of them, go out of business because of a lack of capital. They cannot get loans. There is probably several $1 trillion of capital that has been invested in banks right now in the worst economic times that we've experienced in a long time. The banks' amounts of monies that have been deposited are several trillion. So, $18, $20 trillion, and basically creating funds. And this is corporate America. Corporate America's architecture structure needs to be changed. It's not Black folk or, masses of white folk alone can't do this. This is the structure of corporate America that has to change and reflect America so that the boards have more Blacks, more women, more Latinos and Hispanics, and Native Americans and others. Their boards need to reflect that, but all the way from the top levels all the way down to the bottom levels. And, you've got many companies in America that are very viable, and they don't have very many Blacks, if at all, who work for them. And particularly in the boardroom, all white men still in 2020. That has to say, look, we got to change. And so that's one area. There's so many other areas. We got to address health disparities. We clearly have to address the criminal system. I'm not willing to call it a criminal justice system because it's not just, certainly not for Black and poor people,
right.
Marginalized folks. It is just perhaps if you have resources, but so many in communities of color do not have the resources to get proper representation. Have to be bolstered. The indigent defense attorneys who are actually representing these clients. So there are a number of issues, I think, challenges that we have to overcome. But I am convinced we are prepared, we are capable, we have the ability to do most anything. We just have to identify the will, so that when ability and will come together, it yields results.
Right, right, right. And I think what we're looking at now is a grand wake-up call that has happened. You have the COVID situation, you have the George Floyd situation, along with Breonna Taylor and so many others that have been killed, that have sent a spark to wake individuals up. And you're talking about health disparities, you're talking about the fact that in the poor areas, there are food deserts where people can't get fresh groceries without having to drive outside the community, which exacerbates the morbidity rate because the individual's immune system are not strong enough to handle the COVID-19, of which most people are getting over these days. Yeah, you brought the challenges are great, but I'm hearing both of you speak about your optimistic tone. And as I like to teach, an optimist is not an individual that doesn't realize there are issues. An optimist is an individual that realizes there's a solution to the issues. So all of these particular areas that you're talking about, there are solutions. You're talking about will combining with ability. And you're talking about the corporations becoming more humane, which hasn't happened in a long time, because the first rule of capitalism is capital seeks return. And so it's a profit motive system that we're trying to shift to a humane motive system. And therein is a gigantic challenge that we're facing. Your father talked about this.
Yeah. In fact, that's what got, as you know, that's really why he was killed, not because he was talking about people riding in the front of buses or being able to sit down at lunch counters. He was killed because he was talking about a radical redistribution of wealth and resources within our land. And he was talking about a guaranteed annual income, not raising the minimum wage, but having a living wage. Back in 1967, a living wage. Here we are in 2020, 52 and a half years, 53 years later, and people still don't have a living wage. And although Andrew Yang raised the basic income during the presidential primaries, and because of COVID, the government coughed up $3 billion, which is good. But what has not been addressed, which is unfortunate, is I don't know if it's, I may be getting my numbers wrong, but over $1 billion or $1 trillion sort of disappeared. There's no accountability. So it's not really getting to all the people. And the fact is, the government showed us, though, that they can generate and create enough resources to ensure that everyone has some of their obligations taken care of. And they're talking about a stimulus package right now, again, which is not going to be enough. But the fact is that something is coming, we believe. And it just shows that it can be done. Again, when the desire and ability is there, there's almost nothing that we cannot achieve if we work together. And I think that's one of the problems historically, or in recent times, we have not become committed to working together. But when we work together across the aisle, bipartisanly, there are opportunities. And my higher point is, again, the young people aren't going anywhere. They're determined, they're dedicated, they're dependable because they show up each and every day. In this country, it really is kind of crazy that we even have a homeless population, and we are impoverished. Now, I know capitalism, I understand, has to have a class that it preys on. And if that class doesn't exist, capitalism doesn't work, they say, at its fullest. But as you just said, we need a humane capitalism, a different kind of capitalism. And again, that's what my dad was killed for. He wasn't killed for anything else other than the fact that he was saying, look, we have to create a climate where all boats can live. Not everybody would be, millionaires, but in America, everybody ought to be able to have a decent home. A decent home doesn't have to be a 10,000 square foot home. It can be a 150 square foot home, but a decent home in the United States of America, everyone should have. Healthcare, everyone should have. The best education, everyone should have. And justice, everyone should be able to, and a decent job. Even with jobs disappearing because of technology, we still could create a full employment economy if that was what the objective was.
And right. let's not forget, because agape is named for love, that right. Justice is what love looks like in the public arena.
Right. Now, your father was assassinated for that. He also opposed the war, which was, we have a war economy, and at that particular time, it was a war economy, and that's where a lot of profit was made. So you're carrying a lot of that verve and a lot of that energy in you. I can feel it. Now, when we look at the corporations of America sitting on trillions of dollars, billions and trillions of dollars, we cannot help but think about the fact that America was built upon the backs of Africans, free labor. People don't understand the history of where the original wealth came from. It came from free labor for hundreds of years. And now that's being perpetuated on the corporate level because we have wage slaves. We have corporations making billions, but the workers are not making that much money. So it's another form of slavery in which individuals can't even afford to get an apartment unless they have a roommate. And so that's wage slavery. So you're talking about humanizing the corporate ethos so that, corporations need to make money. Yeah, there's profit there. But when you're sitting on billions of dollars and the workers can't afford to buy a house, then that's an imbalance of energy that will be rectified by the universal law. But there must be, as you're talking about, the willingness to have that kind of vision, whereas profit can't be the only bottom line. There has to be profit, people, planet, and purpose. And that purpose can't be just profit. It has to be on a higher level. So you're talking about actually humanizing the whole thing, which is a part of the work that we're all doing to raise consciousness and go beyond a materialistic, consumer-driven society, which is basically a wasted incarnation, essentially. But I like what you're saying. I like your energy. And you know what? When we complete this, because we're almost running out of time on this one, we're going to continue. Because I want to ask you some other questions. We're going to continue, and I'm going to put that particular conversation on the app. I want to get into your mom, Martin, and what she thought about and her stance on things and her walk, because she was a very powerful being. As a matter of fact, when she came to Agape to check out your older sister, Yolanda, what she was up to when your sister joined Agape, and she sat there in the front row and checked me out and ultimately wrote me the most beautiful letter, really thanking me for building Agape. She said what I was doing was what her husband, your dad, lived and ultimately gave his life for. But when you came to Agape, you sat in the same seat that she sat in. I said, whoa, he sat right down in the seat that his mom sat in. She visited. And I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken, but I think when Rosa Parks came, she sat in that same seat or right next to it. You kind of all gathered around that same area in the spiritual community. But so, before we end here, I want to give you both an opportunity to share any final thoughts, and then we'll pick this conversation up and then put it on my app. Because sometimes they cut us off.
I think that both of our passion, and then you'll finish it up, is that we believe, you talked about the beloved community, and the beloved community was something that Martin's father, in fact, Martin's parents talked and worked for throughout their life. And it's not this utopia. We are firm believers in democratizing the King legacy. Martin did a sermon once on living, not making Martin Luther King an idol, but for all of us to live up to his ideals. Right. And in order for us to create the beloved community, meaning in order for humanity, the King legacy is not about one person, one family. It's all of our legacies. And it's each of us finding our part in creating that beloved community. It's each of us finding our power and our passion and our vision and bringing that to creating the beloved community.
And I would finally say, and I'm borrowing this from my wife, that we have to be the change. We have to pray for change, and we have to work for change. And if love is not yet won, then the battle is not yet over.
Oh, absolutely. Because the beloved community, the foundation is love. The foundation is a godly love, the love of God operating in the human heart, as your father would say. And also in terms of democratizing the dream, democratizing the ideal. That's what we're noticing now, because there's no central leadership. Leaders are rising up in every city, in every state, around the world, and they, the powers that be, the repressive powers, can't kill everybody.
That's right.
Can't put everybody in jail. And so when you have all of these young people, black and white, and straight and gay, and all working for the beloved community, even though they may not be using that language right now, it's a really good indication that something is changing. It's still going to take a little bit of time. We're going to have to change some more policies. Obviously, we're going to have to bring more people that fit that vibration into office. We're going to have to revamp the educational system so it really shares the real history of the country, not denigrating who built the wealth here.
Reverend Michael, if I can say just one quick thing,
please,
because I think that it's so important, and I think people are beginning to understand this. Dad used to say a voteless people is a powerless people, and one of the most important steps we can take is that short step to the ballot box. If we want to celebrate John Lewis, great. But if we want to fulfill what John Lewis wanted us to do, he would want us all to go to the ballot box and cast our votes in every election. This election is beyond critical, but it's not just this election. It's every time there's an election, because we elect judges, we elect sheriffs, we elect county commissioners and supervisors, we elect state legislators. And it's so important, in addition to the president and Congress, the Senate and congresspersons. So it's my hope that we vote like we've never voted as it relates to a democratic society. We are 139 out of 170 countries in the world. We voted 139. 138 countries voted higher levels than us. That is unacceptable. We need to participate in the process to elect, as you talked about, different people at a higher level or different vibrations to office that are going to execute things that move for the people, not for a corporation or not for an interest group, but move for the people. So I just want to encourage us to do everything that we can to encourage people to vote in the upcoming elections.
Absolutely. And that takes us back to the beginning of our topic with C.T. Vivian being beat over the head by a billy club for trying to get the vote for black people. So it comes all the way back to the work that was done years ago, in which people gave their lives, their substance. They were beaten, they were jailed, they were killed for the basic right of voting. So just that alone should give us the impetus to get up and study the issues and cast the ballot. So anyway, I thank you guys for being with me today. We're running out of time here on Instagram, but we're going to pick this back up because I really want to hear about Coretta. I want to hear about some other things that we're going to get into, and then that will be on my app. So thank you guys. I'm going to get back with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Michael. Thank you for what you do every Sunday and every day.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And tell little Yoki I'm going to interview her.
Oh yeah, she's gonna hold you to that.
Yes,
I'm gonna do it.
yes, she is.
Yes.
I'm going to do it. All right. Thank you guys.
All right.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yes. So everyone, we've been with the Kings and very powerful architects of the beloved community. As you can hear, the energy flowing through them. As I indicated, I'm going to get the rest of this interview on my app. If you don't yet have my app, it's very easy to get. Just go to michaelbbeckwith.tv and just subscribe to it. And then go to the App Store and then download the app, Beckwith Inspires. If you need to be reminded, just go to my website, michaelbbeckwith.com, and it will give you the same information that I just gave you. So other than that, looking forward to seeing you virtually on Sunday at agapelive.com or on Agape's Facebook page or on my Facebook page. And every single day, we have a morning affirmative prayer time at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and we have a meditation time. Meditation is very important. I have this t-shirt on that says meditate, meditate, meditate. It's very important for transformation. Every day at 12 o'clock, we have a time for meditation that's led by one of my practitioners. So there's so much going on at Agape that you can participate in. Friday evening, community gatherings, 5:30 every Friday, Pacific time. So I'm going to bid adieu right now. I just want you to know that it is my joy to be of service to the next unfoldment of human consciousness through the work that we do at our Agape Center. Look forward to seeing you. Peace and blessings.
That's good.
Is it okay?
Yeah.